deciding the fate of the Estabrook Dam, shoring up City Hall's foundation, and next steps in a promising partnership to fight the heroin epidemic. This is Council Rewind, and I'm Dustin Weiss. For 7 years since the DNR issued orders to repair or replace the Estabrook Dam, gridlock between the county board and the county executive has left the fate of the Milwaukee River in limbo. Environmentalists say the river will be cleaner and healthier if the dam is demolished, but a handful of upstream homeowners pine for the days when the river was deep enough for them to use power boats. On October 25th, the Zoning, Neighborhoods and Development Committee heard a plan for an unconventional fix to the impasse, rezone the dam out of the county's jurisdiction, and let the sewerage district tear it down.
And there's two different discussions maybe to have. One is over the merits of removing the dam. I know there's people here that want to keep the dam, and I welcome that conversation. I feel very strongly that the dam removal makes sense. The other conversation is whether we should use this process. This is not a process that I created. It was a process the state created. And so I'm comfortable with this process never being used again. This is a very unique circumstance. This is being done in order to, frankly, get around an impediment at the county board level that's prevented us from removing the dam. Milwaukee Metropolitan Sewage District, I think, is an excellent stakeholder. They have their own independent source of funding so that they can do this. This is exactly in their wheelhouse. Reducing the risk of flooding and creating free-flowing rivers is exactly what MMSD is doing throughout the sewage district. So I think it's a great way to transfer the dam over to them. And obviously, I want to be clear to everyone, Estabrook Park will stay a park. It's only being temporarily rezoned institutional. There's a long history with this dam and with another dam in my district downstream. I think myself, Alderwoman Coggs, and Alderman Hamilton were lead sponsors on the Milwaukee River Greenway Ordinance, and that ordinance to protect development along the river and to protect the water, the stormwater regulations going into that river would not have happened, would not have been possible without the community support that occurred because of the removal of the North Avenue Dam several decades ago. We would not have an arboretum, Rotary Centennial Arboretum. We would not have the River Keepers and the Urban Ecology Center and the River Revitalization Foundation creating Turtle Park all along that North Avenue to Locust to even to Capitol Corridor. It's just a beautiful change. It's improved property values. It's increased everyone's enjoyment of the natural world. It's been a win-win-win for everybody. And we could do something similar in Estabrook Park, just upriver, and we've wanted to do it for a long time.
This north shoreline is fairly self-explanatory. You have the island in the middle, and you have the south shoreline, and then you have three components to the dam, all of which would be demolished. The first is the dam itself, and you saw that picture earlier. The second is the spillway. You can see from this picture here the massive amount of debris that gets caught behind that spillway. And then further west, you have what are called ice guards, and you can see, again, the debris that collects. When we talk about ongoing maintenance costs of having a dam or not having a dam, it's these type of things and the cleanup related to it.
Mr. Chair.
Alderman Semper.
Yeah, T, go back to that real quick. You know how sometimes you have pictures that depict the worst situation? How often is it like that?
I don't have a good explanation for that. Often. If you actually look at the satellite picture, you can see from the satellite image the debris that collects there and the debris that is collecting there on the ice guards. So it happens often, and it happens unless you're continuing to clean that up.
In the absence of the dam, though, where does that debris go?
Well, first and foremost, that debris would be cleaned before the dam would be removed, and then it would be a free-flowing river that would continue to go from where it exists now, essentially to the lake, so in other areas as well. So there are lots of ongoing river cleanup areas. It just happens to collect all in this one area, and it would be cleaned before removal.
And that's a great question, Alderwoman, because many people will say that this provides the one opportunity to clean up, clear the potential of logs and other things from trees that have fallen. What typically will happen, though, is you will have other portions of the river where there will be bends and narrows. If you look even a little bit further downstream, on one of the other photos, you see it actually narrows just a little bit further downstream. And there are certain bends, materials will naturally collect.
And the best practice to clean a river is not to put an obstruction like a dam in it and let trash collect there. It's to use these other mechanisms that Alderman Bohl mentioned. It is important to understand the difference between repair and removal, so I want to walk through those three areas very quickly for you. The first is water levels. And there was a report done by SewerPAC, the Southeastern Wisconsin Regional Plan Commission, on water levels that highlights very clearly, and don't worry about the small print here, I'll walk you through it, and the link is available for people. But essentially, alternative number one here is a rehabilitated dam, and you will see that that water level results in 7 to 8 feet behind the river. Whereas if you remove the dam, you lower that to between 0.7 and 2.5 feet. And then you come to the question about, is it better to have a higher or lower river? And the conclusion of that report is essentially that although some residents prefer the aesthetics of the impoundment as compared to a river, a flood event with greater frequency than a 10-year frequency is large enough to cause upstream flooding. So the difference here is, again, higher water levels might be enjoyed by a very small number of residents, but it poses a much larger flooding risk for other residents.
We seriously question why the zoning committee would even be willing to conspire with the mayor to undo the 3-time ruling of the county supervisor board to repair the dam. The decision now is to repair the dam. The county executive has been blocking it at every turn. Now, ask yourself, how would you feel if the county supervisor board got themselves involved and conspired with the mayor or with the county executive to undo a zoning ruling if you had an issue with the mayor? I mean, that's what's happening here.
I live on the east side. I live in your district, and yesterday was walking past the rowing club of Milwaukee. Because of the efforts of the dam being removed, the river is so much more vital and cleaner, and I believe that that also can be a draw for trying to get people to take jobs here within the city of Milwaukee. So I think there's also economic benefit to having a healthy, vibrant river.
This is about a lake. It's about a lake that's the only inland lake in Milwaukee County where someone can put their own little rowboat in the water. It serves primarily the neighborhood west of Green Bay Avenue. Mostly people of color are the ones you see a lot. 8 out of 10 people in Lincoln Park. They're enjoying it. This is a health concern. This is a tax concern. It's a development impact concern and a legal concern.
When the gates are closed in this dam, it basically creates conditions similar to a 100-year flood, and it does increase flood risk for 387 properties. We believe that the vast majority of the public supports removal. We have 1,800 citizens that have signed on to a Milwaukee Riverkeeper petition. There's a separate 150 homeowner petition from a neighborhood adjacent to the river that's also in support of dam removal because of their concern with flood risk.
I agree that financially, for the taxpayers, this is a better bet. I believe that it is both for environmental and as well as ecological and flooding risk, a better bet for residents in the larger area. It's not something that I normally think to do, but I believe that this is something that is necessary to resolve a larger issue that is for the betterment of all Milwaukee County taxpayers and residents.
The plan passed the full council 12-2, and the dam is expected to come down before next spring. When you stop to consider that Milwaukee's City Hall was built more than 120 years ago, it's amazing that it's held up as well as it has. But the curse of being a city with 3 rivers and a Great Lake is that older buildings face a threat of sinking and settling. The city has recently had to launch a multi-million-dollar project to restore the foundation of this landmark building, and on October 19th, the Public Works Committee heard an update on that process.
Now, part of this project scope, of course, is how are we going to transfer this load from the building away from the wood piles, because obviously they're settling and deteriorating. Well, we came up with a passive load transfer, which is going to give us a 100-year design life. And we'll go into that in a little more detail in the next couple of slides. We also wanted to abandon the water recharge system. If we're going to abandon the wood piles in place, we don't really need that water recharge system. We're also going to abandon the hollow walk. We don't need that space. There's not a real quick fix. It's problematic as far as future maintenance, so we're going to abandon the hollow walk and fill that in. And then we're also going to take advantage of the phasing of the structure to upgrade the electrical and mechanical systems in City Hall. Those haven't been upgraded in a while. They're past due, and this is a perfect time as we're relocating facilities to upgrade those. Now, the challenges, of course, is working in an active building. And we sit here right now, and on the north end, obviously, we're doing the work. There's site logistics, there's staging, there's access. Obviously, we're working in confined areas where we have limited headroom. So those are all things that the design team and construction team are working to overcome. We're looking, obviously, to do this over several phases. It's a big area. There's obviously significant dollars involved. We have what we call a 5-phase project that's planned. We're currently in phase 1. And we're also doing this work on second shift. We have an active use of the City Hall here. We want to create the least amount of disruption to the people working in here. So most of the work is starting at 5 o'clock. Phase 1 is the northwest quadrant. The reason we started with that one is because the north side of the City Hall is showing the most significant settlement. This allows us to take care of that early in the project. We started that work in February of this year, and we expect a completion of July of 2017. The scope of the work is to repair the foundations and also construct new mechanical and electrical service and equipment rooms, because those are located in Phase 2, which will be the northeast quadrant, which will be something we'll be starting in July of 17. So we're going to be building these new rooms to then transfer the power, electric, the mechanical, to kind of seamlessly have those go on service with minimal interruptions to the people that are working here. Phase 1, of course, the first part was the demolition. In the upper left-hand photo there, we show the hollow walk that is being demolished. That is along Water Street side. That has been, if you look outside your window, you can kind of see that we've actually braced the exterior wall with some struts. That's to keep the construction loading that would be imposed on the wall from causing that wall to tip over. The upper right-hand photo shows the space after it was all the offices and rooms were cleared out, and then the bottom 2 photos show this demolition of the slab. Again, you can kind of see the exposed steel columns, and then the slab itself and the beam system underneath. The slide you showed you before, which again shows how the load is transferred from the building columns to the stone caps to the wood piles. The photo on the right shows the actual condition where we actually, after we excavated, we exposed those stone caps, and as you can see, there's a lot more room now because we basically went up probably about 6 feet lower. So there was enough room to get equipment in there to do the work. The next photo shows how we're actually going to transfer that load. What we are doing is, and we've completed it, we've driven 213 micropiles. Those are the piles shown in white on the right. And what we're going to do is actually transfer that load from the wood piles to the now steel micropiles. And the photos on the right kind of show that installation going on. As you can see, with the limited headroom, we were limited as far as the equipment. The micropile itself is basically a screwed helical anchor. Conventional piling that you'd see like at the new Bucks Arena, that's long extensions. There's a lot of noise. There's a lot of vibration. Obviously, we can't do that in this situation here. So these micropiles, they are high capacity, and they worked pretty good. The problem, though, that we encountered, and it's one of those lessons learned, is the actual micropile that was selected did not get the actual depths that we were looking for. So they came up about 20 feet short. We do, as process of this, this design, is to load test these micropiles to make sure we actually get the load that we're looking for. The load was, because they came up less, the load was also less. So that resulted in us requiring to add more micropiles. Well, the beauty of the design-build contract is we could design that and construct it pretty seamlessly. We didn't have to go back to the designer, do a change order, negotiate that, which obviously would create delays. We are looking at, and we'll get into that for phase 2, coming up with another micropile that we're currently testing out on Market Street to get us the additional capacity we're going to need, because when we get eventually to the tower, obviously there's a lot of load there. The micropiles that we used in phase 1 won't be able to achieve that. So we're coming up with another micropile system that will be able to be used for those. This next slide here shows, now we have the micropiles installed, we have to start the process of transferring the load from the stone to the micropiles. Well, we have to build, as it shows in that photo there, a big reinforced cage to help transfer the load. We also put dowels, which are kind of shown in red on the left side, to help transfer the shear transfer between the stone and the new concrete. This all gets encased around this, the column itself. And then to do this, the rebar alone is not enough. We actually have to post tension, which is actually put a compression force on the new concrete and basically squeeze that together and create that composite action, if you want to call it, where the stone and the concrete all act as one. To do that, you can see we have like white tubes in the upper right-hand photo. Those are the areas where we're not going through the stone, but in other areas we actually have to drill through the stone. So there we'll be drilling a 3-inch diameter core. We've already tested out with some trials. The stone is very strong, which is good, so it will work. We've actually tried the drilling. That's worked good. And so what we'll do is then put post-tensioning rods, tension it, grout it, and basically squeeze the new concrete around the stone cap to act that all as one unit.
Going forward, we will be looking to take a swath of the building going south in phase 3, projected between 2018 to 2019. The largest challenge in this phase will be obviously that it is the center core of the building, and it is where presently the Zeidler access tunnel does come to the elevator lobby for the building. Now, our initial studies, we have determined that the Zeidler tunnel for the new permanent solution will most likely, where it enters the Market Street Hollow Walk presently, will most likely now turn to the north. So in the actual phase 2 area will be where the transition will occur between the two buildings, and then the tunnel will actually then proceed to the west that way. So you will actually access the elevator lobby a little bit further north of where it presently comes in now. And then as we move into the 4th phase, or the southernmost section of the basement, our largest challenge back on that end will be the large telecommunications infrastructure routing that presently goes through there. There are a significant amount of lines. We have been planning for that since day one. The new landing zone for the head-end equipment is actually in the phase 1 area. So again, we do have our routes planned for this. We are working with DPW Telecom on this very closely, but that will be the phase when we officially have to do the splices and switchovers. And then phase 5 obviously will be the south tower, which does have a high concentration of pilings. However, fortunately, we do not have occupant other than facilitating building access at the Wells Street entrance. That'll be the most significant logistical challenge, but other than that, fortunately, that work is outside of the actual building footprint occupied space itself.
The communication was placed on file. The statistics are as shocking as they've ever been. So far this year in Milwaukee County, more than 100 people have died from heroin-related drug overdoses. That puts the area on pace to easily eclipse last year's heroin deaths. But for several months, the city has worked to launch a partnership with the Medical College of Wisconsin to study the epidemic. And on October 20th, they presented an update to the Public Safety Committee.
This year alone, we, according to the medical examiner, will probably exceed what we had in terms of homicide deaths last year. And of course, what is really sad, on a personal note, is the medical examiner lost his own son. So what are we doing to try and adjust this as a city? I don't think we're doing enough. When I asked the public health commissioner, what initiatives that they have to address the leading cause of death in our city, his response was, well, we give money to the Milwaukee AIDS Clinic. We give $75,000, which is for the needle exchange program, which I support because it stops the spread of HIV. It has an ancillary benefit that the needles are being used by addicts and they don't get HIV, which is great. But it doesn't address treatment. It doesn't address anything about education. And I think it's insignificant when you think of the number one killer of people in our city, and we're not doing little to anything. And I think that we can do better. And these are not disposable people. I think for too long, people have looked at this as a issue of these people have made their own bad decisions, and these are the choices they've made, and they're a moral failing. That's not the case. In many cases, it's an addiction, it's a brain disease, and it's a public health epidemic. The stigma should be changed. Otherwise, we're going to continue seeing our friends, sons and daughters and cousins and uncles losing their lives at a terrible rate. So this year alone, we'll probably see over 246 people die. That's a pretty big number. And the cost to society is expensive. Whether you're talking about law enforcement and locking up addicts, which is not particularly the best way to treat them, the issue of dealing with the problems of theft and burglary. I think many of you may realize also that the drugs are driving a lot of the criminal activity and violent behavior in our city. I can say anecdotally, I've seen a big incidence of suburbanites and people outside of our community who come to our city to buy drugs through the mobile factories or the mobile vehicles that are driving around. I call them mobile pharmacies, in which you now see gang members and others fighting about turf and who to make deals with. Bill Thau, a little 2-year-old boy, lost his life because a gang member or violent people shot up the wrong heroin house. That's where he thought the dealer was at.
What we've done so far is we've completed a systematic review of all the literature out there on how to best treat this epidemic, looking at different community interventions that we can potentially bolster up in our community and go after. And so currently we're drafting an academic paper to get that information out into the public in a systematic way. We've also added on top of the data that Alderman Murphy and Sarah Zarate initially analyzed. So we've added in the last 6 months of data from the medical examiner, and we found some pretty scary things coming out of it. Is that the amount of fentanyl that they're finding in these overdose deaths have been increasing. So just to give you guys numbers, for the entire year of 2015, there were 30 deaths that were related to fentanyl, and in the first 6 months of 2016, there's been 39. So fentanyl is a much more potent opioid, and it's been contaminating a lot of the heroin and also some of the pills that people are buying on the streets. And yeah. Exactly. So it requires a lot more of the antagonist naloxone to reverse that. And so I think that this is also partly responsible for the increase in deaths that we've seen. There are other contaminants that we don't know about yet that are new synthetic opioids that are making their way as contaminants, and we just don't have the assays yet to analyze those. And I think they're also contributing to some of the deaths. We are starting to map some of this data to put it onto a geographic grid to see where these deaths are occurring, how many times they occur in the hospital, in the home, and things like that. We're continuing that analysis, and those maps will be available shortly on our website. Also, over Labor Day weekend, there was a rash of overdoses that we saw, and so we looked into those and started to look at what else we could do to help mitigate some of this, and we publicly accessed the EMS protocol for overdose deaths in the county. We performed an in-depth review of that based on all the medical literature. EMS also did a review, and they made some changes to the protocol. We reviewed those changes, and we agree and hope that they'll be implemented quickly. We also, to try and get a better handle on who's doing what in the community to address this problem, we convened an operational committee of various members. So people who are kind of boots on the ground, community advocates, people who are more, say, academic like us, and then people who are actually taking care of some of these patients. And so we met and we gathered and realized we didn't really know what everybody was doing. And so we have started to do an inventory of that. And once we get a better handle on what's happening in the Milwaukee community, then we're going to disseminate that information as well. But going forward, what we're going to do next is continue to analyze some of the medical examiner data, and we're going to start looking at the narratives. So these are just the history leading up to the death to see if we can get more information about some of the events that led up to the overdose death, and see if there's anything like we can coalesce from all of these different deaths. We're going to start looking at EMS data throughout Milwaukee and North Shore, and then begin mapping sort of trends and looking at how many times did these people touch the system? Were they in the ER? Did they get called by EMS or 911? And then before they ended up dying. So looking back through the EMS data to figure out how many times they touched the system. And then we're going to start doing a lot of more like dissemination of this information, because everyone needs to have it, right? It's not just in the with us, waiting to get published and like peer review and everything. So I think we need to have real-time data out there and know what's happening so that we can decide what to do next and go forward.
Is the fentanyl the chemical that's already in the heroin, or is this something that
Right.
the drug dealers are using to cut it and make it more potent?
Right, so it's a contaminant, and they make it more potent. Sometimes users will seek it out because they're looking for a higher high. Sometimes they don't know that it's in there. And there's been a lot of stuff coming overseas, sometimes from China, with synthetic fentanyl or synthetic opioids like acetylfentanyl and other sort of derivatives.
The scary thing is fentanyl. Right now, a very interesting story in the New York Times last week, a college-educated couple in San Francisco in their 30s bought $3,000 worth of fentanyl from China online. It got shipped over. They bought on eBay a pill machine, how you can put together pills. They were going to make $70,000, $80,000 a month on that $3,000 investment, and potentially up to $3 million a year. The feds caught them. But the feds in the story point out this is very easy and accessible, and they are very fearful of a huge explosion of the use of fentanyl or other synthetic drugs on top of what we've been facing. I mean, so I think we saw a huge increase in deaths on Labor Day, but out east, it's been even worse, and the East Coast has been terrible. So I think if we were looking at trends, I think that's a big issue, and that's where, we need to talk with law enforcement about better interdiction methods of trying to get it, and education.
This is a huge issue that I don't think the overwhelming majority of this community even realizes how bad it has become and how scary this whole thing is. I'm assuming that you folks are working on some kind of a action plan that you want to bring that would involve all levels of government and also the private sector on these following steps.
We'll be announcing that fairly shortly.
More updates on the project are anticipated in the near future. And that's a look back at some of the important issues from the most recent Common Council cycle. For the City Channel and Council Rewind, I'm Dustin Weiss.